Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. We're going to be jumping back into the SCP universe here. This has been a video that's been requested by a lot of different people. We're going to be checking out the Hanged King. This is the Exploring series version of the Hanged King, and we may do a follow-up on this from the Volgan Mystery Illustrated, as a lot of people have requested me to do this video from them as well as just the Exploring series. So we might do a couple of different versions of this. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to be checking out the Hanged King today. Links will be down below in the description to the original video and channel. So if you do me a favor, click on those links. If you enjoy this video from the Exploring series, give it a like. If you enjoy his content, give the man a sub. He makes a lot of great YouTube content. We're doing this reaction live from our YouTube members. If you'd like to come in and join these live reactions, we'd love to have you guys in here and hear your input and thoughts and join our discussions. There is a join button down below the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits that I offer. Check out those tiers, see if any of them have any interest for you, if you would like to take your support to the next level. Regardless, thank you very much for just taking the time out of your day to watch the videos here. But for now, we're going to jump into this. So again, this is the Exploring series, the Hanged King. So yeah, volume's good. Let's get on into it here.
The Hanged King. The SCP universe often wears its Lovecraftian influences on its sleeve, filled.
So this is a Lovecraftian kind of eldritch horror thing, which I'm all about. I like, you know, this stuff, especially because for those of you who, I'm a big FromSoft fan. I love Souls-like games. It's one of my favorite genres of games, which actually stems back to Ocarina of Time. I actually kind of feel like Ocarina of Time, that Zelda game, was really kind of the first of that genre that at least I played, and it's one of my favorite games of all time, and it's why, one of the reasons why I love the From games, because they feel very much like they're kind of more adult, darker themed versions of that. And out of the FromSoft games, Bloodborne is my favorite one. I love Bloodborne. I love the setting. I love the story. I love the whole eldritch horror aspect of it, and the layers of reality, and things aren't really, you know, what things seem to be, and there's just things outside of our reality that if you have a certain level of understanding, you can then begin to see and grasp, and the more you see and grasp, the more into madness you get and stuff like that. I love stuff like that. So if that's the case, if this is going to be getting into a lot of these, you know, eldritch themes and stuff like that, this is going to be one that I'm probably going to be pretty into. So anyway, let's continue.
With cosmic horrors indifferent to humanity. Some of the references are perhaps more blatant than others, such as the Hanged King and its connection to The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers. The Hanged King is another mysterious alien entity in a universe that already has its fair share, but that doesn't make it less interesting. The Hanged King is not as widespread across the SCP Wiki as, say, the Scarlet King, as it's only featured in a few SCPs so far, so I'll go into as much detail as I can. The Hanged King was first introduced in SCP-701, nearly 10 years ago at this point. 701 is a Caroline-era revenge tragedy play titled The Hanged King's Tragedy, taking place across 5 acts. The first known publication of the play is dated 1640, with no known author, and no other information can be found about it. It was reprinted again by unknown individuals in 1733, 1790, 1813, 1965, and 1971.
Interesting that it's got no known author and is being reprinted by no known individuals or publications. That's something that's very interesting. So it just seems to be like something that just appears at certain times through history. Interesting.
Sometimes under different names, and sometimes it's been simply photocopied and passed around universities. Performances of SCP-701 cause an outbreak of psychotic and suicidal behavior in both performers and observers, in addition to other strange events, roughly 36.78% of the time. The majority of performances do not result in any anomalous behavior, but SCP-701 is nonetheless believed to be responsible for at least 10,000 and likely many more deaths since its original publication.
Huh. So if it only affects 30% of people, I wonder what that like trigger is. Is it an emotional issue that people are going through? Is it some kind of genetic thing that they have that gets triggered by this? Interesting.
In those cases where 701 affects the performance, the timeline of events generally follows a consistent pattern. 1 to 2 weeks before the opening night, cast members will begin to deviate from the published text during dress rehearsals. These deviations will be less like improvisations and more like the performers are collectively working off of a different script. No one will be aware that anything has changed, believing that the play has run that way since the start. The actual event will occur either on opening night of the play, or at whatever performance of the play will result in the greatest attendance. In the final scene of Act 1, a mysterious hooded individual will begin to appear on stage, usually in the background.
Looks like
and will
something straight out of Dark Souls.
Walk off stage, but will simply disappear before it goes backstage. None of the cast or crew will remark on the individual's presence. In Act 5 of the play, the event will culminate as the hooded individual is incorporated into the play. The cast will proceed to murder each other or commit suicide, sometimes with objects that have spontaneously appeared on stage, and rioting will break out in the audience, leading to a bloodbath.
They actually commit suicide.
If any audience members survive, they will likely leave the theater, but continue to commit random acts of violence. If they survive for 24 hours, their personalities will return to normal, but many will be traumatized and some rendered comatose. So, we have some sort of mimetic play that makes people suicidally violent, but to learn more about the Hanged King himself, let's look at a summary of the contents of the play. The play seems to be set perhaps in 14th century Italy, but many aspects of the setting are clearly fantastical. The play begins after the death of a king, supposedly due to natural causes, and now his younger brother, who has married his brother's widow, is to be crowned.
Interesting.
During the coronation, the drunk queen privately admits to some of her attendants that the king did not die in his sleep, but instead he was murdered by both herself and his brother. As a final show of disrespect, the deceased king was hanged from a tree like a common criminal. She also admits that a visiting minor noble is actually the son of the dead king, making him the rightful heir. The son, Antonio, later receives a visit from the ghost of the king.
Weird that she would even admit those things to anyone. You know what I mean? Because gossip is still going to spread like wildfire. And eventually, like, the masses would probably believe that if they, like, the king was loved or beloved by his people, that could cause a lot of problems. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. That's kind of weird.
The son, Antonio, later receives a visit from the ghost of the king, who confirms the queen's story. The new king finds out about the queen's drunken confession, and learns that 3 others heard it as well. A duke, the duke's daughter, and a priest.
Yeah.
He proceeds to lock up the queen in a convent, claiming that she has gone mad, and begins to plan to deal with the 3 others. Meanwhile, Antonio begins to plot revenge against the current king and queen. The king has the duke killed, and his corpse placed in a stew, and has the duke's daughter also locked up in a convent. Antonio heads to the convent to kill the queen, who is warned of his coming, and plans to murder him using poison. Antonio sees through the plan and forces the queen to drink the poison instead, killing her. The king has received a powerful poison from the ambassador of Alagada, an unknown kingdom we'll discuss more later, and plans to poison the stew he's made from the duke's corpse, feeding it to the court to cover up the truth.
Jesus.
As the banquet begins, Antonio appears in the palace with a signed confession from the king's co-conspirator, providing details on the Hanged King's murder and the cover-up, as well as proof on Antonio's lineage. The king is deposed, Antonio takes the throne, and all is well.
Right.
This is the structure of the play as written, but when an SCP-701 event occurs, a number of deviations will appear in the performance. Most of the deviations revolve around the mysterious kingdom of Alagada, including nodding to the hooded individual as the ambassador of Alagada. More focus is put on the tribute that the king owes Alagada, and in the one transcript we have of an event, the actor playing the king is hanged and eviscerated on stage. The actor playing Antonio then says, "With this, the tribute, in full it is paid. With this, fool's blood, it is the hanged king's." The king's throat is then slit, followed by the rest of the cast hanging themselves from ropes, as one of them says, "With this, our blood, it is the hanged king's." This is then followed by chaos amongst the audience.
I would say so.
SCP-701 is clearly inspired by the book, The King in Yellow, by Robert Chambers, which in turn inspired H.P. Lovecraft and August Derleth, leading to the current connection between the King in Yellow and the Great Old One, Hastur, within the Cthulhu mythos.
Hold up. I can't just sit there and look at the splash screen and not,
The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers, which in turn inspired H.P. Lovecraft and August Derleth, leading to the current connection between the King in Yellow and the Great Old One, Hastur. Within
Why is this not going forward, dude? Hitting the buttons to go for...
within the Cthulhu myth.
There we go. Okay, so it's just a symbol. I assume this is a symbol of the Great Old One that he's talking about. Okay.
Hastur, within the Cthulhu mythos. The King in Yellow features multiple short stories connected by a mysterious play that drives a reader mad, particularly if they are artistic.
Interesting.
The play is a
So I wonder...
multi-act story.
God damn it. I wonder if that's what the trigger is then. People who are artistic themselves are into like actual actors or something like that. There's enough of those people, that's why there's like that 30% chance of whatever happening. I don't know. Interesting.
Within the Cthulhu mythos. The King in Yellow features multiple short stories connected by a mysterious play that drives a reader mad, particularly if they are artistic. The play is a multi-act story involving a noble court in a faraway place, in this case an alien world, and the presence of a mysterious stranger visiting the court. At the climax of the play, during a masked ball, the stranger is told to remove his mask, when he reveals that he is not wearing one. The book reveals very little of the actual text of the play, although other authors have attempted to recreate it, such as More Light by James Blish. In the original book, reading the play forces more of an obsessive madness over an individual than a violent rage, although later versions, such as in the Tatters of the King module for the Call of Cthulhu RPG, do feature something much closer to SCP-701's effect. That's all well and good, but we're really not much closer to figuring out what the Hanged King actually is,
Right.
other than a subject of a cursed play.
Right. I mean, sounds like so far. King Yells Up, one of the reasons I like the Hanged King. Yeah, I have not read it, so, but after this, it's definitely got me intrigued to read it. But right now, so far, it almost just seems like, yeah, this is an SCP that, for whatever reason, in certain cases, comes out when this play happens and takes tribute in the form of people killing themselves, which then causes like a mass hysteria kind of thing. So I guess the question is like, what is the trigger, if any, as to why this SCP comes out? Is it just random, etc., etc.? I don't know. Interesting so far. Yeah, I'm gonna keep dropping this fucking thing. Anyway, whatever.
We're going to have to look a little deeper then, specifically at SCP-2264, an extra-dimensional city called, as you might have guessed, Alagada. The entrance to Alagada, or at least one of the entrances, is an iron door in a hidden chamber beneath Martin Tower, part of the Tower of London.
Interesting.
The only way to open this door is through an alchemical process, and it's believed that the door was created by Henry Percy, 9th Earl of Northumberland, who was imprisoned in the Tower of London for many years due to suspicion that he knew about the gunpowder plot against King James I, but did nothing about it. He was also known as the Wizard Earl, partly due to his interest in scientific and alchemical experiments. SCP-2264 states that his journal discusses the 4 alchemical stages of the magnum opus, the process by which an alchemist would create a philosopher's stone, capable of turning base metals into gold or silver.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Foundation has a Department of Alchemical Studies, and after following the process outlined in the journal, they were able to open the door. Anyone who passes through the door into the realm of Alagada will find all of their belongings missing, and their clothing replaced with an outfit similar to those worn at masquerade balls.
Interesting.
Specifically those associated with the Carnival of Venice. Agents have reported that the outfits feel somewhat organic, describing it as chitinous, and although the clothes can be removed while inside of Alagada, for some reason the masks cannot be. The most common inhabitants of Alagada are described as roughly humanoid, and typically wear the same style of outfits. Alagada possesses a yellow sky, dotted with an indeterminate amount of black stars, corresponding to no known or hypothesized constellations. Again, this is likely a reference to a stanza in the King in Yellow play, reading, "Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies, but stranger still is lost Carcosa." Buildings seem to have been carved from a single seamless material, utilizing impossible architecture, and inhabitants routinely break the laws of gravity, such as by climbing upside-down staircases. Black, white, yellow, and red are the only colors that are seen in Alagada, and the city is described as having the odor of dried flowers with a hint of mold, or something like the scent of old books. Additionally, although the size...
So, like, it's almost like, yeah, you're being transported into the play itself that's been written down in a book or something like that. And, like, you're actually being transported into the actual book. Kind of like the never-ending story, I guess, for a weird analogy.
The size of the city has been difficult to measure. It has been confirmed that the city is located on an island surrounded by a black ocean. Individuals visiting the city have trouble estimating time and space while inside of it, although those with a history of lucid dreaming have shown far greater self-control and attention to detail.
Interesting.
Apparently, it's easy for someone who enters to get addicted to the city, and most of those that do manage to make it out have trouble explaining what they experienced. A Foundation doctor experienced with both hallucinogenics and lucid dreaming is sent in to properly examine the city.
So I wonder if that's the case, where, like, if you enter the city, whether it be, like, through this portal or through the dreamscape or something like that, you somehow find your way here, that's the tribute, like, you're expected to pay. Maybe something happens here, and you're expected to pay tribute, and those who don't, the Hanged King comes for them in the real world and essentially forces them to commit suicide.
The other agents sent with him quickly succumb to the decadent pleasures that the city has to offer, but the doctor avoids this and soldiers on. He discovers that there is a universal translation of languages well within Alagada, as although the other agents hear everything in English, he hears in his native Spanish. Written words don't translate quite as easily, as it seems the native script of Alagada is quite alien, and there are some words that don't have an equivalent in human language. They also met with another foreign visitor and fellow scholar, the Wandsman of Colmanus, who informed him that the city was called Alagada, and it was located on the border of Neverment.
This very much reminds me of the Zinch Greater Demon. I can't think of the name of it right now. The bird with the two heads or whatever that can only see the past and the future, can't see the present. I can't think of the name, but this very much reminds me of that right now. The Wandsman is another faction you'll learn about. Gotcha.
The Wandsmen wore a beaked mask and exquisite robes, and their hands were scaly with black talons. The Wandsman showed the Doctor a scroll displaying a map of the multiverse, presented as layers and layers of endless spirals.
Interesting.
Which only served to give the Doctor a migraine. The Wandsman went on to explain the power structure of Alagada, saying to avoid the powerful entities at all costs. The Doctor, based on the descriptions, believes they could be quite dangerous reality benders. There are 4 masked lords that directly oversee Alagada. The Black Lord, wearer of the Anguished Mask, the White Lord, wearer of the Diligent Mask, the Yellow Lord, wearer of the Odious Mask, and the Red Lord, wearer of the Mirthful Mask. Each is said to be terrible, although the Black Lord was the victim of a political struggle some time ago, and was exiled to a dreadful dimensional backwater. This backwater is, of course, our dimension,
Right.
and the Lord is now contained by the Foundation as SCP-035. The Wandsman goes on to say that the 4 lords serve as advisors to the King of Alagada, and most visitors come to the city seeking a boon from the King. The Wandsman spoke very little of the King, and also suggested the Doctor avoid the Ambassador of Alagada as well. The Doctor later makes a second trip into the city, hoping to find the Wandsman again, searching the massive palace library for him. They eventually find him, but the Wandsman informs them that the Ambassador will soon return after visiting the city of Aditum, which he describes as a terrible city filled with equally terrible people. Aditum was the Davite city-state that was overthrown by the first Sarkites.
I thought that sounded familiar.
And is generally regarded as a holy kingdom for them. The Wandsman mentions that it is said that the Grand Karcist of Aditum serves an elder being that could rival even the Hanged King of Alagada.
Which I assume is Yaldabaoth, if I'm remembering her correctly. Yeah.
Which would be Yaldabaoth.
Yeah.
Changing the subject, the Wandsman describes himself as a scholar and walker of the astral plane.
That seems to be the case in any time there's multiversal dimensional stuff going on. Time is fluid and yada yada. Time travel could be possible, etc.
A sailor of the celestial sea and a spelunker of the planar deep. He admits that there is something strange about the Doctor's aura, but he has encountered others with similar auras. He mentions the deathless merchants of London, driven by greed and black ambition, which would be Marshall, Carter, and Dark.
Interesting.
Also, there was a stranger in a strange land, smelling of fear, that looked as if they didn't know where they were, and vanished just as suddenly as they had appeared.
Yeah.
This would be the Foundation's own Dimension Hopper, SCP-507.
That guy's life has to suck. I'm just saying, man. You're just sitting there chilling, and all of a sudden, whoop, you're in God knows where.
It seems also that other Sarkites made their way to Alagada, reeking of decay and embryonic fluid.
Yeah.
At this point, the Ambassador returns, and the Wandsman suggests the Doctor flees immediately back home. The O5 Council votes to send in a mobile task force, Psi-9 Abyss Gazers, in order to find the Ambassador and the King, and determine the level of threat they represented to humanity. 12 agents were sent in, and 1 returned alive. We're given a transcript of an interview with the survivor, who was in critical condition upon return. The agent begins by saying how remarkable the city was, words failing to do it justice. The MTF had no info about what their targets looked like or how to locate them, and so they began by finding the palace. The agents described their trek through the city as blurry, with everything following a sort of dream logic. The details were hard to focus on, even at the time.
I mean, the whole thing sounds like just an acid trip, right? The whole thing sounds like some kind of weird drug-induced, like, fever dream reality kind of a situation.
But they noted a number of individuals engaging in sexual pleasures, many of them being natives. He said their skin
definitely is also leaning towards the kind of Eldar Slanesh, kind of stuff to go into the 40K tie-in again, but definitely seems very much like this is some kind of like decadent aristocratic place where those in power can essentially do really what they want to at the expense of others, kind of a situation.
Was like porcelain, but they noted a number of individuals engaging in sexual pleasures, many of them being natives. He said their skin was like porcelain, but the more you focused on them, the less human they seemed, some with too many limbs, and some with too few. One of the agents had to be pulled away from a native, who was described as having curves in all the right places, making it easy to ignore the tentacles.
Yikes.
Wandering the labyrinthine palace, they spent...
That then reminds me of Mass Effect, with the Asari, if I remember correctly, the Asari, the race of psychic females that apparently, there's some little slight lore that can be missed in Mass Effect 2, where everyone sees them as their native species. Humans kind of see them as more humanish. I can't think of the other alien races off the top of my head right now. The Krogan, see them as more Kroganish, et cetera, essentially. So
spent most of their time descending stairs, all the right places, making it easy to ignore the tentacles.
Yeah.
Wandering the labyrinthine palace, they spent most of their time descending stairs, and just as they thought they had reached the bottom, they were outside again, looking at the palace in the distance. The difference was that everything was dark now, drained of color in a hazy gray twilight. The streets were now empty, and the city looked ruined. They re-entered the palace and began to hear whispers inside of their heads in a language they had never heard before.
Interesting.
They then encountered the ambassador, an entity with no face, with what looked like a skin-tight outfit and high heels, but this was actually its body. The agent says that it stood so damn proud, radiating arrogance, and even though the agent couldn't understand what it was saying, he could tell that it was narcissistic. It proceeded to laugh as the agents were forced to savagely harm their own bodies for its amusement, breaking their bones and rupturing their organs. They screamed the entire time, begging for mercy, but no sound left their lips. It seems the ambassador sent back one survivor in order to send a message. The agent was taken to the throne of the Hanged King, and I'll take the time to read what he saw verbatim. There I saw the king. It was anchored in place, hollowed bonds around its corpse-like hands and throat, its face hidden beneath a veil. Impish creatures crawled all over it, caressing its twitching body as if intending comfort, while others pulled the tethers even tighter. The king trembled and quivered, and I saw pale tendrils slither in and out of its tattered robes. I looked on as the veil was lifted. The agent stops to beg the interviewer to kill him, because he can't live with what he's done, but the interviewer just asks him to say what he saw under the veil. The agent says, "A god-shaped hole. The barren desolation of a fallen and failed creation. You see the light of long-dead stars. Your existence is nothing but an echo of a dying god's screams. The unseen converges, surrounds you, and it tightens like a noose.
Jesus.
The agent's request for termination was denied, and his arms and legs had to be amputated due to damage. He's currently on life support, being interrogated and monitored due to his contact with the ambassador and the king. An unsent letter was found among Henry Percy's notes that was addressed to Christopher Marlowe, famed poet and playwright. It seems that Henry and Christopher had visited Alagada, and Christopher was influenced by the ambassador to write a cursed play about the Hanged King, SCP-701. Henry urges Christopher in the letter to burn the accursed play, but Christopher was murdered before the letter could be sent. Well, we certainly have some more information now. The Hanged King is an eldritch entity that is apparently on the same level as Yaldabaoth, and rules over an extra-dimensional city accessible by an unknown amount of other dimensions.
So, I mean, yeah, it's another essentially kind of creation being, I guess. You know, I mean, if it's on the level of Yaldabaoth, Yaldabaoth is, you know, a being that created beasts and whatnot, and potentially humans. So if he's on that level, then he's also a being that can create things. Perhaps maybe it's part of what we dream, you know, because it sounds like it's a dreamscape place. People who have lucid or are good at lucid dreamings have the ability to, you know, control their dreams or have a much easier time traveling through there. You know, they meet these emissaries or these multi-dimensional travelers, you know, so maybe they're kind of implying that our dreams are us entering, you know, a multiversal place, you know, so maybe this eldritch being created this, you know, dreamscape or something like that. And I don't know, interesting, but obviously it would be something that would be quite powerful. Like I said, it sounds very like when we're going through this and he's describing things, I'm just attributing stuff from like Bloodborne, because that's like visually what I see, you know, all the various eldritch creatures and stuff like that from Bloodborne. And like, yeah, anyway, let's continue with what we have left here.
An extra-dimensional city accessible by an unknown amount of other dimensions. It would seem, though, that the Hanged King is bound to his throne, and the active rulers of Alagada are the ambassador and the four masked
and the lords. So it's almost like they somehow, whether they created him and have imprisoned him there to use his power for their own benefit or something of that nature, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it seems like it's an imprisoned god. So, yeah.
The ambassador influences artistic people into creating material about the Hanged King, spreading his influence, just like the King in Yellow. To learn more about the Hanged King's backstory, we'll have to look to a tale titled, "And So the Crows Laughed." While there's no canon in the SCP universe, this tale presents a unique and interesting take on the creation of such a terrible entity. The tale presents a kingdom under revolt, the peasants storming the palace and dragging the king out into the streets. They placed heavy rusted chains around him and covered him in rags, breaking his bones in the process. His followers and servants were butchered, the court jester beheaded as his mask lay broken on the ground. The palace was looted of all of its treasure by the raging mob, but the wiser men of the city, the scholars and artists, fled the kingdom instead, knowing what the things in the palace dungeon meant. They knew that the king did more than just torture out of corruption and indulgence, but he followed something much darker, something that shouldn't be remembered. The tomes and symbols reminded them of the ancient gods of the abyss, and it was clear to them that the king sacrificed not just his own soul, but the souls of those around him. A lion, once the king's pet, was now just a skeleton covered in carvings that they could not unsee, and the king's soldiers fell easily to the mob, because it was as if something had sucked the life out of them over the years. Meanwhile, the mob cheers in delight as the king is dragged through the streets on broken knees, mumbling unholy words through his broken jaw. The king is taken to a hill where an old tree stood, so that they could hang him like a common criminal, nameless and forgotten. They cursed and spat at him, but no one would dare look in his eyes, trying to hide the unsettling feeling in their hearts and minds as the filthy king continues to mumble things that they did not want to hear. As the king was hanged, heavy chains still around his body, he spoke inhuman words that came from dark places, and then laughed until his final breath. The cheering died down, and the people, not wishing to gaze upon the hanged king for a second more, fled the hill quickly, as it seemed as if his laughter still echoed. Crows eventually came to the hill, circling around the hanged king, laughing all the while. The people had intended to leave the king there until his body decayed, but the lifeless look of the king was so resentful and disgusting that everyone wanted to bury him beneath the earth. They buried him as shallow as they could, for no one wanted to stay long enough to dig a deeper hole, and they went back to their lives, hoping to forget what they had witnessed. On the first day, a homeless man reported hearing strange noises coming from the hill, and crows had gathered around the king's grave. He was dismissed as a madman. On the second day, many residents of the city found themselves ill, coughing, bleeding, and trembling on the floor as if they were bound by heavy, rusted chains. The river that flowed through the city ran red, smelling of blood, and many died.
Definitely also seeming to have kind of like biblical plague references, you know, pestilence, all that kind of stuff, apocalypse, you know, themes here.
Those that survived to the third day found themselves able to move again, but they were caught in a madness, slicing their own throats or ripping their faces off. Blood streamed out of houses, and all the animals except for the crows fled the city, the crows silently watching the madness. The crows on the hilltop laughed as the hanged king rustled in his grave and climbed out, chains still around him, and the rope around his neck. He had bargained the souls of his people to avoid the path of death, and he made his way back to his palace. He made his way into his dungeon, where he stepped up to a throne covered in sharp, rusted spikes.
Yikes.
The king sat on the throne, the spikes impaling his dead body and his soul. This was his rightful throne, but he was there to suffer forever. The palace began to shake, the city trembled, and the skeleton of the lion stood up and roared. The city turned inside out, along with everything inside of it, bending space and time. The city and its inhabitants were now in another place, transformed and remade into something twisted and inhuman. The dead jester, wearing his broken mask, approached the king with a silver cup filled with blood. He offered the cup to the king, speaking words that weren't quite his, saying, "With this, our blood, it is the hanged king's." The king's hand was too weak to hold the cup, however, and it shattered on the floor. The crows laughed with their harsh voices and left the city as the dead stood up again, putting on masks to cover their ripped faces.
Interesting.
The people began to cheer, parading through the city and starting a carnival, laughing as the king silently screamed. And so the city is ruled forever by the hanged king, while the masked dead celebrate and parade until they rot. Those that had fled the city, the scholars and artists, did not find peace, however. They were haunted both in waking moments and in dreams, with whispers from the Twisted City. They were given visions of the Hanged King's court and his cursed city, and the thoughts took root in their minds. They would go on to write dramas and poems, composing songs or paintings of what they had seen.
Spreading his influence.
And those that would view them would come within the Hanged King's reach.
Right.
If we accept this tale, then, the Hanged King was not a primordial entity of eldritch horror, but was instead just a king. We don't know where this kingdom was located, or whether it was our Earth or another version of Earth, but the king's dealings with some sort of dark gods eventually created the extra-dimensional city of Alagada.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it's like, if he is this, like, eldritch god being on the level of Yaldabaoth, then if this tale were to have tied into that, what was he like? What entity did he make the deal with? You know what I mean? But I guess it's two separate things, because that was what I was thinking the whole time. Is like, okay, if he ends up becoming this eldritch god horror being on that level, then what being did he make a deal with? You know what I mean? To become that by giving up these souls. But they're two separate things.
The tale doesn't really discuss the nature of the ambassador.
Right.
The masks
or the
are
lords.
clearly important, and it's possible that the jester is one of the four lords.
Right.
Perhaps the ambassador plays a similar role to the modern take on the King in Yellow, a physical avatar of the great old one Hastur that can operate where Hastur cannot go.
Yeah, it could be. It could be the kind of physical form that the king can take at certain times to spread his influence, and that's why it's only really affects those that I guess are kind of more artistic or whatever. Anyway, yeah.
Alternatively, perhaps the Hanged King is indeed nothing more than a prisoner, and the ambassador is the only godlike power that rules Alagada.
Could be.
Perhaps the Hanged King ushered forth a god, leaving him as nothing more than a god-shaped hole. Ultimately,
it could be, yeah, he could have made a pact with some other entity, and that entity actually tricked him, and that entity, like the Hanged King, became the source of power for that entity, which is why he's like sealed there and imprisoned, and those things are maintaining him. As long as he's suffering, then the ambassador could, if it is the ambassador, that it is this other being, this greater being, you know, that could be the case too. Hanged King is one of my favorites. The description of his face is a god-shaped hole. Always stuck with me. Yeah, a god-shaped hole. Yeah, that's. I mean, that could be interpreted in a lot of different ways too. Because the way I see it is almost kind of like a black hole face kind of a thing. But then I also think about Elden Ring and the Frenzied Flame. The Frenzied Flame is essentially just like almost kind of like a black hole with a yellow flame that envelops it. You know, it almost looks like a singular eye in some ways, similar to kind of like the Eye of Sauron. You know, an eye wreathed in flame. You know, I don't know, but I could see a lot of ways of how this could be interpreted. Like he's saying, you know, he could have made a deal with an entity to escape from death, giving up his townspeople and their souls and their power or whatnot. And in doing so, the pact is kept, like he never dies, but his suffering and those souls he gave to them empowered the ambassador, you know, and the ambassador could be that other being, and the ambassador then goes out to spread the influence of the king, and thus, you know, any kind of suffering and tribute given to the king then empowers the ambassador more, kind of a situation. Yeah, I was pictured like a hole in the fabric of the universe human minds can't comprehend. Yeah, something like that too, you know. Because, like, again, that kind of ties in with a lot of Eldritch stuff in general, and the fact that, you know, these beings are so different and alien that we just can't comprehend what they actually are and what they actually look like. And to even attempt it just drives you insane, you know? And so that could also be part of the warning that those emissaries were giving him to avoid the ambassador and the king, is it's a situation where they're just so alien and different. They might not actually have power over us, but they're just so alien and different that to look at them drives you crazy and makes you do those things. They might not actually be forcing you to do them. You could be just doing it to yourself at the fact that just looking at them drives you insane.
We're again left in a God-shaped hole. Ultimately, we're again left with far more questions than answers.
Right. And I mean, those are the best stories. The best stories are the ones that give you enough information and answer enough questions, but then present more for you to kind of create your own headcanon and interpretation with. That's why I really think that the Souls games are so great. Not only are they have like great gameplay, but the stories are very intriguing. They give you just enough story to like really flesh out the universe and make you want to learn more about it, but also you have to really kind of be a detective and piece things together and interpret things, and certain things are open to be interpreted in different ways.
Ultimately, we're again left with far more questions than answers. And although there are other tales that go into a bit further detail on Alagata and the Hanged King, I think it's best if I leave off here. The homages to the King in Yellow, Hastur, and Carcosa are all pretty clear in SCP-701, the Hanged King, and Alagata, respectively, but they make interesting additions to the SCP universe. There's far less material on the Hanged King compared to similar entities such as the Scarlet King, but time will tell if SCP writers can mold a truly great story out of the shackled god.
And I now heard his voice rising, swelling, thundering through the flaring light. And as I fell, the radiance increasing. I thought I'd messed with it. Anyway. And though and as I fell, the radiance increasing poured all over me in waves of flame. Then I sank into the depths, and I heard the King in Yellow whispering to my soul, "It is a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God." Order of the Dragon from the King in Yellow. Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, I definitely think I'm going to do a follow-up video on this. Maybe from either the Vulgate or Mr. Illustrated to do the actual, I guess, article reading. Because I definitely want to learn more and, I guess, hear more of the actual experience of the MTFs and the doctor that went into this land. And see if there's any more information to be gleaned from it. But it also, I guess, as with a lot of these eldritch kind of horror stories, things are left open to be interpreted. So, you know, is it actually really like a trapped god? Is the Hanged King an actual being that may have been trapped and corrupted in some way, and the lords and ambassador are using it in some way? You know, are they able to tap into its power and using it for their own gain and enjoyment and delight? Is it a person who you know, made a pact with another being and has essentially been left to suffer for all eternity, and any beings that are killed and their blood is given tribute to him then fuel the power of this other being, and the ambassador could be a facet of whatever this other god is, and the ambassador is then going out and spreading you know, the story to gain more tribute, to gain more power, whether it's, you know, like I said, through some kind of pact, or whether or not this Hanged King is an actual like entrapped god in some way. I don't know. It's very interesting. And again, it could also simply just be that these beings are just so foreign and alien that our minds can't comprehend them to the point where we're driven to madness and we do these things to ourselves and they actually don't really have any power over us. And that could be why the emissary had warned them to just avoid them, not because they're necessarily evil or cruel or would do things to them, but simply just because they're so foreign and alien that we can't comprehend them. Kind of a situation, you know, I don't know. Yeah, keep in mind, it's 2 separate articles. 701 is the play. I can't remember the number of the video. I got it right. Yeah. So, very interesting. Very interesting. I definitely want to follow up and learn some more and see if there's more about this. Because like I said, stories like this are very intriguing to me. And again, especially, you know, through the lens of, like, again, Bloodborne and from Soft Games. That's how I kind of, like, interpret some of these things. Like, as he's describing the world, I'm thinking about how it would look like in a Souls game. You know, what would this world look like traveling through that as from the perspective of, you know, a Souls game? What would the ambassador look like as a boss? What would the cinematic introduction look like? What would these lords look like as a boss? And what would the cinematic introduction look like? And especially, you know, the Hanged King himself. What kind of what would it look like, and you know, things like that, because that's just how my brain works. That's just where my brain goes to with a lot of these stuff. So, but I definitely want to follow up with some more of this, and I'm intrigued. So if you guys in the comments have anyone else you want me to look at specifically for more information on the Hanged King, that's Vulcan or Mr. Illustrated or anyone else, or any other articles that come into play with this, please let me know in the comments, because I definitely want to follow up with some more and learn some more information about the Hanged King for sure. Found the video on 701 by the Vulcan, and okay, gotcha. So but yeah, that was the Hanged King by the Exploring series. Links will be down below in the description to the original video here without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. Please do me a favor of clicking those links, checking them out. If you enjoyed this video of the Exploring series, give it a like. If you enjoy his content, please give him a sub. Man deserves all the support. He makes a lot of great stuff. If you enjoyed my commentary and reaction, do consider leaving this, you know, a like and a sub on this video, as it helps me and it helps the channel grow. We're doing this reaction live for my YouTube members. If you'd like to come in, join, be a member, and join in our discussions. We'd love to hear your opinions and join the conversation. There's a link below the video, as well as a link in the description. You can click those, see if any of the tiers have any interest for you, if you would like to take your support to the next level and support me monetarily. But regardless of any of that, thank you very much for just taking the time to come in here and hang out, watch the videos. I greatly appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the time to do so. Hope you're having a wonderful day whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.